Hey everybody, it's Mo here, and today we are going to talk about how to flourish in your personal growth, how to flourish in your growth with others, in your career. And flourishing is the opposite of product placement. Languishing, which is a book I massively enjoyed by core level researcher, synthesizer, thought leader, Corey Keyes. And all of you know that when I really, really, really like a book, audio listeners, I know you can't see this, but if you could, it would be how many tabs I've folded over in the book Languishing by Corey Keyes. And it's up there in the record books, Corey. You should be proud in your like Mo Bundle litmus test of book impact.
Love it. That's a new way to measure. Use dog years. Dog years.
You're a 92 dog year
I know. I
author
ranked
now.
92 on dog years.
Better than dog years. Okay, so we're already into it. So what I love about Corey is that Corey, what I love about you is that I love writers, I love thought leaders who bring new ideas to timeless kind of things that the people struggle with, like how to flourish. And I particularly love authors that are core level researchers. There's a part of me, there's a fiber that's jealous that I didn't do any the research myself. But you've really written a great book. So audio listeners, again, book is called Languishing. But really the book, I think, Corey, is about flourishing, how to do it, super practical. And we're going to talk about how to do that within the work realm, and specifically for people that are creating possibilities to others, people that are growing a book of business, things like that. So, Corey, why don't we just start with the definition of languishing and compare that with flourishing from your perspective as a core level researcher? I think that's a great place to start. And then as we get in the interview, we'll talk about what are the major 5 levers we have to pull to flourish more and talk about your advice around that. So go for it.
Sounds good. Languishing. Well, it has been described as the feeling of blah, or I never heard this word until Adam Grant used it in his Times piece, meh. Now, I bring that up because I don't think that does it justice. And I don't want people to walk away thinking, languishing is just being exposed to three or 4 days constant rain and clouds, right? It's not that. When there is actually a diagnosis. There's 14 questions in the book that represent a questionnaire or a diagnosis of the presence and absence of good mental health. And languishing, you have to have at least 7 out of the 14 signs of flourishing that are deficient. You have them maybe once or twice a week or less. And so you're missing things like the following. Your life has no direction or meaning. You rarely experience that. You may feel that you're not being challenged to grow and become a better person. In addition to that, you might also be thinking, I don't have anything where I'm making much of a contribution to the world or my community or workplace. You might now also feel that you have no community to which you have a sense of belonging. In addition to that, you might not like most parts of other people or yourself, which are 2 separate questions: accepting yourself, accepting other people. And last but certainly not least, you might be lacking in warm, trusting relationships. And on top of that, the last criteria is that you're deficient in one of the 3 criteria of what I call emotional well-being or feeling good. You rarely feel happy, satisfied, or interested in life. So you have to have a deficit of at least one of the feeling good and a deficit of at least 6 or more of the 11 criteria for functioning well in life. So all of that is to say, languishing is the absence of some really important things that make your life meaningful and a sense that you belong and matter to this world.
So then I just thought that was so insightful because I took the 14 questions myself, and it just prompts you to think about things that you can do. And then what's interesting about the book is you dive really deep into flourishing and what are the 5 maybe vitamins, as you call it, that we can get into, we'll get into in a little bit. But I think maybe for now, the next layer to unpeel is the difference between languishing and flourishing. What is that? Yeah, go.
Right. And now just to be clear, I chose the word flourishing as a stand-in for the word mental health,
Hmm.
in part because, or largely because, when you use the word mental health out there in the world, people have very different conceptions of it. And rarely is it what I mean by it. They will
Yeah.
think you're talking about mental illness or mental health problems.
Yeah.
Or they might be thinking, well, mental health, it's just the absence of mental illness. Now,
Mm.
my model argues that lots of people are not mentally ill, but they're not anywhere close to flourishing. They are in that middle category called languishing. So
Hmm.
to be mentally healthy, you have to have it, again, 7 out of the 14 signs of those questions, where at least one is one of the 3 feeling good, and you feel it almost every day or every day in the last month, combined with at least 6 out of the 11 criteria for functioning well. Again, almost every day you felt purpose. Almost every day you felt confident to think and express your ideas and opinions. Almost every day you felt you were able to you were good at managing your daily life and so forth.
Mhm.
So flourishing is a combination of functioning well and feeling good. And it's amazing to me, all the research points to the following. When you hit that sweet spot where you have at least 7 out of the 14 almost every day, it's remarkable how people function, right? I hear again and again, Mo, that we want people to toughen up. It seems like the world is getting less resilient, a little mamby-pamby, weak, and whatnot. We need to toughen up. Well, here is my response. If you want tough, make sure your employees are mentally healthy, flourishing, because all of the signs show that when they're flourishing, they can handle high conflict, high stress workplaces and not get distressed. They can have bad days or confront a lot of sources of stress, and their negative mood doesn't amplify compared to when they're languishing. They don't slip into depression or anxiety and a variety of other mental illnesses. I'm here to tell you that languishing is a gateway for a lot of the problems that we can't fix. So we're better off preventing it, in my opinion. So if we deal with languishing before it becomes an even bigger problem, like people get suicidal, they want to quit work or quit school, they're becoming depressed or anxious.
Mhm.
Even frontline healthcare workers in Italy who were languishing were much more likely to develop PTSD during the COVID pandemic compared to those who were flourishing. Isn't that remarkable?
Yeah.
There's something about flourishing, being mentally healthy, that creates strong, truly resilient human beings. So if you want tough, you want resilient, let's prioritize mental health as more than the absence of mental illness. It's the
Mm.
presence of flourishing.
I'm gonna pull on something really random, but as you were talking, it hit me. My publisher Todd, who's helping me get our next book ready, which will come out in
Mm-hmm.
August, as you know, it's called Give to Grow. And
Hmm.
he asked me last week. He said, "What's the difference?" It was just really curious. He said, "What's the difference between how you talk about all your relationship development training and things that you do?" He's asking me this. "What's the difference between how you talk about things now versus how you talked about 20 years ago when you started? Not quite 20, but
Hmm.
getting close. It's like 18 and change." And I said, "Well, when we first started out, we talked about almost this as if it's sales." And I do air quotes on that in the video. People that watch on video can see the air quotes, but you can't see air quotes if you're on audio. But we were almost like sales training for people who don't like the word sales in a way. We know lawyers and accountants and like
Hmm.
how we met. But we didn't talk about that as much now. What we talk about now is how can you make an impact on the world? How can you live the life you want to be by growing? How can you create possibilities for others where everybody wins at every turn? And I don't know if it's a change in the world that happened. I don't know if it's a change in just it just sort of happened. I don't know. But that's
Hmm.
I think one of the reasons I really your book Languishing really struck a chord as we get into the flourishing aspects and the things that we can do, the alignment with what we teach, which is helping others first, building a community. I mean, we could look at the 5 vitamins in a second, but there's so much alignment, learning a new skill yourself,
Yeah.
living your purpose. All these things are so aligned with how we talk about things that I didn't realize in a way we're teaching people to flourish, not
Hmm.
as scientifically as you do, but we really are in a way. And I
Yeah.
think that has a really deeper connection with people than air quotes sales training for people who don't like the word sales. So what's your hot take on that? I'm just curious.
Well, it's interesting. After I set the book down and I gave it to the publisher, and they said you can't add any more research. Sad thing.
You're done.
That's a sad day for me. Well,
You're
here,
like, what?
no, and here I come across this amazing data that were in the G20 countries. There's a company called the Global Commons Alliance. And they asked citizens in the G20 countries the following question. Would you agree or disagree that the way your country's economy works, should it prioritize the health and well-being of people rather than focusing solely on profit and increasing wealth in your country? The average across the G20 was 74% agreed. Then Deloitte does another follow-up in 2023, asking pretty much the same question in Australia, Canada, Great Britain, and the United States. And now it's 77%, the average. So something has changed over the last 20 years. I suspect if that question was asked 20 years ago, it would have been far less of the citizens saying our government, and I suspect by government, they also include our companies, should prioritize the health and well-being of its employees, not just focus on profit and wealth.
Yeah.
It's not that people are against hard work or somebody profiting and wealth growing. It's just that when it comes at the expense of their health and well-being, I think people are starting to say, I might draw a line.
Yeah.
You can have my hard work, my sweat and my tears, but you can't take my well-being, my purpose for living, my sense of autonomy and mastery from me at the same time. If you do that, you're destroying my soul, my purpose for living. You're taking away my reason that I return home to a family where I feel grateful rather than destroyed. So I don't want to be dramatic. I'm simply saying, I think it's time. We need to draw a line and say that this line is where we can both flourish at work and at home.
Yeah. And yes, and it's an and, because as I read through the 5 vitamins, every one of those in our own way, we teach that. And again, it's a different domain. It's more narrow, but my point is people can have both. And I think that's really where the gold is.
Yeah.
If somebody's just got elected partner at a law firm, or they just got elected MDP at a big consulting firm or whatever, or they just got their big breakthrough, they're an account manager now at a big healthcare company, whatever it is. At that moment, they're really excited because they achieved some goal that took 10 or 15 years to get to. That's true. But B, now they all of a sudden feel the pressure to grow a book of business, and that can feel icky. And I think what I think is neat about blending our two pieces of content is people can have both. They can have the mastery of this new role, and they can also do it in a way where everybody wins. And I think that's where flourishing could reside really well. Yeah.
I think, it's also a mindset change when you can actually get people to think that when you're trying to build a book of business and feed, right? You're trying to create a sort of feeder so that younger people, you're changing your roles, right?
Yeah.
That when you're prioritizing profit and wealth, it doesn't mean that you have to exclude these other things. They're not
exactly
opposing. They can be deeply compatible. And so I think that's also a mindset change. As soon as you have to prioritize creating business and dealing with numbers that have dollar signs before them, you might think that this stuff that we're talking about now isn't compatible and you can't think about that anymore. And yet it's the very thing that actually leads to work productivity. In the book, I talk about how Flourishing people they miss the fewest days of work, remarkable low numbers of missed days of work, remarkable low days of presenteeism, very reasonable healthcare utilization across the board. And so it's a win-win.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I like where you put it too, where if somebody's focused on growing a business, they're not only helping themselves flourish, they're helping their clients flourish, and they're helping their teams flourish because they're able to do new things. So let's do this. So there's sort of a
Okay.
triple win there. Why don't we drop into the 5 vitamins? Because
Sure.
I think these are just super interesting. And I wrote notes on every one of them that we can go into, but I think let's go through each one. But why don't you give us an overview of all 5, and then we'll drop into the first one.
Yes. And I want to make the point that this comes from research. And the research shows that even among people who are depressed or languishing, if they do more of each of these vitamins that I'm calling the vitamins for flourishing, they begin to have better days. Now they measured better days. We don't even have to get into that, and as they have better days, they begin to move away from depression and languishing and towards flourishing. And people who are flourishing, who prioritize these 5 activities we're going to talk about, are more likely to stay that way. But here's the thing. The research also showed that if you're flourishing and you stop doing those 5 things, you have as bad of a day as somebody who's depressed or languishing who does nothing. None of them. It's not something you just sort of do to get there and you say, well, I've arrived and I can now get back to work and ignore these 5 things. Because if you stop, you will start having bad days, just like the same bad days as someone who's depressed or languishing. So go ahead.
Well, so the mental, there's almost a mental fitness analog to health fitness or physical fitness there, where if you can be in really good shape, but you don't do anything for 6 months, you get out of shape fast. Same thing. Okay.
This is like a mental, emotional, behavioral workout. And again, so these are 5 activities. These are not necessarily prioritizing mental exercises. So the first one that they found was very conducive to promoting flourishing and saying there was helping other people, getting engaged and helping other people or helping something in the world. In other words, prioritizing a kind of the sympathy of kindness and growth, that you could have the capacity to be useful and helpful to the world so that you can leave whatever you're interested in as good as you found it, or maybe even better. So the first one is helping others, helping something in this world. The second is, as you said, learning something new. Now, this isn't the kind of learning that's instrumental so that you can actually do more work or get promoted at work. This is something you do simply because you want to learn it. You want to grow in this regard. It may or may not end up being something useful to your career or something in your life.
Yep.
But something about learning new things and seeing yourself get better at them is very conducive to flourishing. The third is what I call transcending the everyday world through spiritual or religious activities or rituals. We can drop into that one because that may turn some people off immediately, but I don't want people to sort of think, well, if I'm not religious or spiritual, I can't benefit here. We can talk more about that.
Well, I won't cover it now, but I wrote some very specific note that anybody can do that in our world. So I thought that, yeah. So keep going. This is great.
So, and the fourth is, of course, connect and socialize. But it's not just connecting just with anybody. It's the prioritizing warm, trusting relationships in community where you belong, you have that sense of belonging. Or third, or in addition, relationships where you matter. And by matter, you are contributing, you are needed, and you contribute things of worth to others, and you need others to do the same. So it's kind of a connection around quality rather than quantity.
Yeah.
And then the last one is...
And I could say this, like when I was writing Give to Grow, again, my publisher Todd, he's a genius. He just prompts thoughts. At one point early in the process, he said, what's the one word this book is about? And when we're figuring out if the chapter's in or out, or a subsection's in or out, or a sentence in or out, it has to come back to that one word. And I said, oh, it's easy. It's relationships. The whole through line of the book is relationships. So again, when I was reading Languishing, I was like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
this prioritizing warm, trusting relationships, focusing on quality over quantity. I mean, so many things that you have in the book, again, just totally aligned with all of our teaching. Okay, so
All
back
right.
to side. Go back to the fifth one.
And the fifth one is play more. And yes, I'm using the word play because it takes you out of time, which we've commodified, and puts you into a different sense of time that's simply about fun and active leisure rather than passive leisure. So those are the 5 vitamins that have been shown to be very conducive, not only to creating better days, but keeping you in that category of flourishing or helping to encourage and move people away from depression or languishing.
Yeah.
So let's where do you want to start, Mo?
I want to start with helping other people, number one, because that's my favorite one. Yeah. So let's drop into it. And then I think what'll be neat, I think, well, this book is already super successful. It's going to get more successful. People are going to see you on lots of podcasts, things like that. What I want to do here is be like the only podcast. You can do it with somebody else if you want, but hopefully the only podcast where you apply these principles to relationship and business development. So that's really, and I'll help you with that, obviously. But when you think about helping other people, so we're dropping into number one. What are the most important things that you think? Like, be super practical, and you can just talk in broad strokes, and then I'll sort of push us into the area of where our audience would love to go. But just in broad strokes, what's important about helping other people? What are acts that people can do that will dial this one up? Things like that.
Yeah. And this is in the chapter, I make sure I put this notion of purpose, which is part of the helping chapter later, because I think there's a good bit of work out there about purpose-driven organizations and trying to find your purpose. And I think there is this very real thing that I talk about, which is purpose anxiety, whereas if you start too large and think that you've got to dedicate a big part of your life or your work life to some big cause, you may never get there. So I talk about my own examples of how I just start small in this category when I was in recovery and dealing with my own demons and mental disorders, which is you start small and you start local, right? And it may just be on a weekly basis, you choose a day where you're going to find a couple ways, maybe 2 to 5 ways to see need in your world. So what you're trying to do is sort of like take your head up, right? We have this look up from looking down and looking at your screens, and go out there in the world and you will see people with need, small and some big. And are there opportunities for you in those moments to simply do a small act, right? To begin to say, well, hey, do you need some help? Just ask. I remember that story about I think it was the daughter remember the story of the daughter said, I would go in there and ask the family, can I help in the kitchen? And the parent would say, well, you don't need to ask anymore. You can see you could be helpful. Join me. There's need. It's obvious.
There's always need. Yep.
You always need. And out in the world of strangers, yes, let's ask. But I want people to simply start noticing where there's need. Sometimes it's just on your way walking down the block, going to the coffee shop, going to the restaurant in your workplace or something.
Yeah.
But also you can actually start to say, well, what do I really care about? Whose pain or suffering do I feel drawn to? And often you will be drawn, as I was, to helping the people who are like me. I suffer from mental illnesses. And so my work and my purpose has always been driven by a passion to help people who are suffering from mental illness and mental health problems.
Ooh.
Because I know that personally. So start with your lived experience of
Yep.
things that suck your well-being and your flourishing and take it away and say, well, I could be helpful and focus on their well-being and their flourishing.
Yeah.
So that's a great place to start.
Well, I think it's great. And then again, what I'm going to try to do with each of these is like dial it really more narrowly towards
Mm,
the world that our audience is in. So, like the audience, a lot of times might feel like, oh, I'm under pressure to bring in this amount of revenue this year. They're just could feel that. They have a revenue credit goal, they have an origination goal, they have a dollar or euro goal, whatever it is. They're feeling that pressure. Well, that's on the fast path, the languishing and anxiety and all the other things that we talked about. The flourishing
mhm.
angle of that was be say, hey, let's say you've got 3 potential new client meetings next week. Maybe walk into those client meetings thinking, how can I be helpful? So maybe instead of feeling the pressure and anxiety of I need to, you know, get them to sign some contracts and hire me for X, Y, or Z, that's what
Mm,
people could naturally fall into. But maybe the person just needs someone to listen to that's outside their organization. That's an incredibly valuable, just listening is an incredibly valuable thing
yeah,
our experts can do. Maybe they need help thinking through how to reorganize their department. And that's not what our expertise is, but we see different departments that are in that way. So we might be able to help. Maybe they
mhm.
need some career advice. Maybe they need some personal branding advice. Maybe their son or daughter is thinking about a career in a profession. We can help them. I mean, who knows what it is? But to your point, I feel like if our orientation isn't us, I need to convert some deal or whatever, but rather it
Yeah,
can be them. How can I be helpful? And just to your point, just notice what those are and then potentially maybe say, well, gosh, can I help with that? Or would it be helpful if
yeah.
I introduce your son or daughter to this person or whatever? Anyway, I think there's something really deep underneath your idea of that's instead of being focused on our own worries, if we can be focused on as much as we can, where can I be helpful or where do I notice a need? Your point. Your thoughts?
Yes. And I also think it's such now you've been around this block a few times and have worked with these corporations and companies
Yep.
and I wonder to what extent when somebody's approaching client development, do they have the mindset and the sincere idea that they're going to walk into a meeting and say, I want to be as useful and helpful to you as possible. And that's why I'm here. I want to hear what you need and what you could possibly get from me because my team and my company, first and foremost, wants to be useful and helpful to your company. So, where and how can I do that?
Yeah.
That I want to, and then listen.
Yes.
Is that, I mean, and sincerely, that, I mean, wouldn't that
No,
be a
they
great
don't.
way to develop business?
Yeah.
Because you could also then
Yes.
say, wow, you can have that feeling, a genuine feeling. Yes, this is business,
Yes.
but this is a relationship too,
Or
right?
complete. Yes. That's what should be done. So here's the funniest thing is I'm throwing a number out there. There's no research behind this, but I honestly, at least before people go through our programs, I really think, Corey, that 1 out of 100 people do that. Maybe 5. It's a really low number because companies are applying all kinds of pressure on people to do the opposite, to come in with, and I'm going to make a joke about it, but to come in with this 70-page PowerPoint slide deck that has every single thing our company does and start talking about yourself and all the stuff you could do. And like, it's like throwing spaghetti at the wall. I hope something works. The
Ooh.
problem is with that other person is they're feeling sold to, and I mean that in the bad definition. They want to
Hmm.
run. They're like looking at their watch either mentally or actually physically, like, get me out of here. I've even talked to some people that have codes with their assistant that says, hey, if I text you a period, that means come in and get me out of this meeting as soon as possible because I'm dying. so, so,
Oh.
but like 100% of the people who are really good do what you say. They don't walk in with a PowerPoint deck. They walk in with a blank page of really well thought out questions and they've done their research. They have ideas of how they might be able to help, but they start with,
Hmm.
gosh, I noticed this in your 10K and it was really curious to me. Or I heard that, your CEO talk about these things, or the board talk about these things. And it sounds like these are
Yeah.
priority. What's your take? But to start with questions, figure out what their priorities are in their words, and then figure out how to be helpful. And again, that might be commercial. It might be just relationship wise, but just whatever it is, the focus should be on helpfulness. Anyway, back to you. Your take on
Wow.
from our, yeah, go.
That's interesting to me. I will admit naivete. And I am shocked by that because I think this idea isn't all business transactions at the heart of an exchange of one thing for another, which is I'm getting something of use. You're helping me do what I need to do, which is make my company successful.
Yep.
And I'll give you this legal tender. And that seems like a fair exchange. But what
Yep.
I want from you is something that helps me. And so I would want to know first, well, does this person really want to help me, or are they?
Yeah.
I would have my
Oh, yeah.
hyper vigilant out. Does this person really care, and do they really want to help me? Because like legal institutions, right? They come in. You would think they all do the same thing, and to some degree, they do. But then the question is, how do you differentiate yourself? Is it just because we're big and we get people from bigger universities, well-recognized universities, or we have people with big books of business? I don't think we're always looking to spend more on big books of business. We're looking to see, well, does this place really care about me and my business?
You just nailed it. You just
Do they
nailed it.
care?
You just nailed it. And it's so hard to tell let's just talk about law because we'll pull that thread through. Like it's really hard. Let's say you're a general counsel and you're hiring a transactional lawyer or there's big litigation, maybe that make more sense. It's really hard to tell in several 30-minute meetings, who of five firms is better from a technical expertise. Yeah, there's
Mm,
representative matters. Yeah, they're chambers rated or not. Or yeah, there's this stuff that I saw online. But it's really easy to care or see who cares. It's much easier to differentiate yourself by orchestrating a better buy-in process than it is by saying you're the best technical lawyer.
yeah.
And hardly anybody thinks of it that way. Go ahead.
So I suspect what happens then is that companies go out and ignore whether they care, and they buy somebody has a proven track record, who's the pit bull that's going to go in there and has at any cost wins, and that's the person I'm going to hire, right? So when I was like, well, I think companies do that because, well, we've forgotten how to ask these questions about do they care and can I be useful? So all I do is trot out my pit bulls and there, we're going to go get a win for you.
Well, when we were working with one client and the senior-most person in the room had been at this firm, he had become a GC and he came back. So he was over at this huge life sciences company as a GC for like 5 years. And he
Mm,
told a story of where there was a really big patent litigation that they needed to hire the best of the best for. They interviewed 5 companies, and by order, it just happened to be this way. The first 4 were pit bulls, like you said. We're the best. Here's all the stuff we've done. Look how great we are. The last one came in and said, we've got an idea. We'd like to offer this thing on our dime just because we think it's the critical part of this defense work.
mm,
And we want to be helpful for you. This is how we could do it. And this is what we're going to learn. And once we learn that, then we're going to know what happens after that. And so 4
mm,
came in thinking about themselves. 1 came in thinking about how to be helpful. The helpful firm won the work. So it's a
mm.
minority of people who do it the right way, but those who do win the lion's share. And
Yeah.
and they flourish, which is sort of
Yeah.
the whole point. Because it's a
Well,
whole lot more fun to do it that way.
isn't it interesting too? I wanted that company that won or the law firm that got the contract, the
Yep.
business, not only said what you said, but I suspect they you could have gone a step further and said, well, here's my strategy, how I want to do this. Does this align with your values? Right? Is this how you want to win?
Yeah.
Or do you
Yeah.
not care? Do you not care how I win? If I destroy everyone and just pull all kinds of strings, you don't care as long as I win, right? Okay. Or do do you want me to hire somebody who aligns with my values? Here's a strategy, and this is how we're going to win for you. Do you like that way of going about a win?
Yeah, stylistically,
So,
right.
yeah, I would like to. Oh, okay. I would think some companies. If I would, I want to win the right way, not at any
Yeah.
cost.
Yeah, yeah. Because sometimes the right outcome isn't distorting the other organization. It's maybe getting into a licensing deal. Like they could be
Mhm.
partners in essence.
Yeah, why create adversaries when you might think that's down the road the way we dealt with this was something that, oh, I might actually want to do business with you later on.
Exactly. Let's put a bow on that, and because I'm thinking, man, we still have 4 more to get through, and I don't want to get it all. But I think I'm really happy that you started with helping other people because that is at the core of success. It really is, and
Mm,
it's not only of success of flourishing and for yourself, but also growing this book of business that helps more clients. You have the impact you can have externally, and then, like we talked about, as you grow more, you have an impact internally too. So let's go to
yeah.
the second one, learning something new. That aligns, Corey, because so many experts,
Hmm.
by the time they get to us, at least, they've spent 10, 15, 20, sometimes 30, 40 years learning their core expertise, but they've never spent a meaningful amount of time learning the expertise of relationship development, which, as you
Mm.
know, you said in the book, is a skill that can be learned. So just go into this idea from a flourishing perspective, learn what learning something new is doing to people and how helpful it is and things like that.
Yeah. Well, let me start with a sort of a perspective that I got from working in academia and around public health people and leaders. The more I was around them, the more I started to realize the following. There were a lot of good leaders in the healthcare and public health and academia who probably were at the top of their game and that got them into that leadership position. But once they were a leader, I got the impression that they stopped learning because they weren't up to date on the newest developments. So they were still operating with the thing that got them into the position. And I think their success put them in a position where they were so busy or so important that they either didn't have time to learn something new or they were so arrogant by that time that they didn't think they had anything to learn. But the world around them was changing. Now, here I was doing a very different approach to public health. And I can't tell you how many times I went into these in the CDC and other places, and these leaders were like, you could have thought I was speaking 10 different languages other than the language they knew.
Yeah,
It's as if you stop learning once you become a leader. And I'm like,
yeah,
that's the wrong attitude. If you want to stay effective, you better keep up with it. And if you don't understand this, go to the Jefferson Memorial in Washington, D.C., and read one of the four walls. He talks about, I might as well wear the clothes that I wore when I was a child, that if I'm going to forever be under the constraints of my barbarian past, I must
mm,
keep up with the changes of time if I am to lead and be a good person,
yeah, yeah,
And so my thought, I'm just saying that because I think this happens in employees too, and even our educational system. All our learning is put at the beginning of life. It
mm,
gets us to work, and then as a culture, we stop the priority of education.
yeah.
So everything is segregated by age. You learn at the beginning, you work and use your learning, and then you're done.
It's silly. And
That's a
yes,
very silly model.
yeah,
We have to stop that. There's got to be
yes,
lifelong learning initiatives, not only for older people, not just for retired people, for leaders, for employees,
yes.
lifelong learning initiatives.
And the takeaway here, I can't remember if it was in Languishing or we talk about it a lot, is this Victor Ottati's research on earned dogmatism. I can't remember
Hmm.
if you had that
That
in there.
wasn't, no, that's not in my book. So I'm
Yeah.
interested. Yeah.
Well, it did actually longitudinally, it showed that the more, and I might have this a touch wrong, but this is how I remember it, is basically the more you think you're an expert, the more closed-minded you become about that domain. So
Mhm.
he actually coined the term earned dogmatism. And if you Google a quick Google search and you'll find Ottati's research, it's so compelling. And it basically lines up with
Mhm.
exactly what you said. And I think what's interesting is that when I, again, putting sort of a more narrow view around relationship and business development is I just have to pinch myself because I get to work with the best of the best in the world in this topic. And because I'll interview them at a big partner retreat and I get to know them beforehand as we prepare, or they sit in on our classes and we prepare because they're going to be like the
Mm,
cultural steward of the organization. So I get to meet the best. And I'm telling you, like with a correlation of one, they are the kind of people who just never quit learning about relationship and business development. That it's so
mm,
obvious, but the people who are the best are the people who still treat it as a craft in and of itself and are always trying to find a new learning on how do you can deepen a
yeah.
relationship, be helpful to somebody, stay in touch, stay top of mind, all these other things. So I just think this idea of learning
Hmm.
something new, not only does it just, I can totally relate, like it's energizing, but I think if we apply it to business development, if our audience can take away the idea of this is not something you just like go to a class, check the box, you're done, but this is something you can continue to get better at every year that you work. And if you do that, you're going to feel better about yourself because you're going to flourish because you're actually
Yeah.
learning something. I don't know. Put a bow on that. I'm not sure I
Well,
landed the plane.
well, but it reminded me of people I've heard where they have to take these continuing education credits to stay, I guess, certified or
Yep.
licensed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've heard it was so saddening to hear that many of them find it disengaging, they rote, they go through the motions. Like those are the opportunity. It seems to me that there's something missing there. There's a disconnect. There's these companies that are selling you services for continuing education, but education is barely engaging the other people. They're just getting through it so they can get on with their work.
That's exactly what it
It's
ends up
like
being.
why do companies pay for that and not demand something that actually not only engages their employees but also does the added benefit of helping them move a little of the dial towards flourishing rather than just paying money to keep your people licensed? Why not actually demand something that educates your employees that's helps them feel like they've learned something new?
Yeah. Yeah. Because then you get this triple win where, yes, they're getting the credit for the hours they need every year or two, but they're also doing something that's going to help the organization and they're getting something that'll help them flourish. But that's like
Mhm.
real learning.
You know.
Okay, let's move to our third, which I think you
Mhm.
you tagged as transcend. And again, this is the one we hit it at. Like it might turn some people off, but it's not going to because we're going to find a way. So again, start with the broad strokes, and then I'll help dial into relationship development.
Yeah, no, I tried to not complicate this chapter. I can't tell you how many times I've read books and articles about religion and spirituality, and I felt more confused by the end of it than I understood what the hell they were talking about. So
Yeah,
I tried to see what they all have in common is it helping people engage in activities that get them to think about their own deficiencies in a way that encourages them to work on them to become the following: a better kind of person for other people. You don't have to be religious or spiritual. If you want to grow in a way that you become, some people call it character, but a person who has integrity and character, right? Person who's more kind, more giving, all these qualities that we all admire and we talk about at the eulogy, right? Those are the things that spirituality and religion are all about. Forget all the other nonsense that is about human beings trying to package this all in a way that we're all imperfect and we the religious leaders and religion can go astray. So can spiritual people, like yoga
yeah,
leaders can end up cavorting with their students. I mean, that doesn't mean yoga is bad. It just means that we're all human Don't
Yeah.
miss the message. These are about practices that aren't, and the other thing I'll say is this. We talk a lot about yoga. I and my wife practiced yoga for 20, 25 years. We did all the poses, but I was very interested also in the philosophy. And it turns out the research backs up that practice. It's not just doing the poses, it's not just doing the meditation that matters. It's also studying what comes after for those spiritual traditions, which is
Mm.
really the ethical philosophy of how to live a better life
Yeah.
and become a better human being for the world. There's just something about that kind of growth that when you are a better person for other people, not only are you more helpful and useful, but you get the kind of feedback from the world that says you have something that only you can give away. Nobody can take it from you.
Yeah.
You're a trusting person. Only you can give that quality of yourself away. Nobody can take that from you.
Yeah.
You're a kind and compassionate person. You are the only person that can give that away. Nobody can take that away.
Yeah.
And who isn't proud of themselves or their kids or their spouses and partners when they act this way? You are too when you
Yeah.
act that way. So why do we let go all of these things because people who practice them and lead them are imperfect? Because we need this kind of growth in our lives.
Yeah.
More than ever, the world is begging for it. Stop the nonsense. If you want
Yeah.
kindness in the world, be kind. If you want compassion and love, be love and compassion. You don't just demand it, you have to give it to get it.
Yeah.
So that's the lesson here. We have to stop wanting the world to be nice and expecting it to happen for us because everyone wants what we want. So you have to
And
give it to get it.
this is so good. And this, I got to tell you, it was my favorite chapter because I thought it
Really?
would be my least favorite chapter. It was my favorite chapter. And I want to say the actual subtitle of this chapter. The title's Transcend, and it's the third of our 5 vitamins, but the subtitle is so great. It says Accepting the Inevitable Plot Twists of Life. And when I think about relationship development, business development, I think the reason that so few people are successful and so many people drop out is because there's almost nothing in life that has a longer, well, we could go on crazy stuff, but in the business world, there's hardly anything in the business world that has a longer time to success, more highs and lows, less certainty. You're totally uncertainty about what's going to happen. There's more luck
Yeah.
involved. Somebody that you've been working with for 9 months, it looks like the engagement's going to come in and they leave and go to another company. Like there's so many crazy things that can happen. And I think what's neat about this chapter is you teach how to succeed in the moment. How do you recenter yourself very quickly around generosity and building that community and being helpful? I felt like if there was a thread that was through this whole chapter, it was about quickly recentering yourself when crazy things happen, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where the sort of behavioral aspects of spirituality in particular, as well as religion. So, like doing the poses, really being disciplined and regular about going to the mat for an hour and a half on a regular basis, meditating on a regular basis.
Yep.
What human beings need is a quiet mind that's under their control.
Mm.
Because when the plot twists happen, you want to be able to stay present rather than being taken down the road by your emotions. Your emotions will take you in places along with past memories and things that you have no idea rushing up into your feeling and your mind because of what just happened. And they will take you to places that you will not be happy with in the way you react. Because a quiet mind and a mind that pays attention to what matters allows you to stay present in the moment when things don't go the way you expected them to go. And suddenly you have the capacity to decide that the best way to respond in this situation, if at all. Sometimes you don't react. You say, I can't put my best face forward, my best intention forward right now, so I'm going to say nothing. I just say, I'll get back to you. Thank you for what you told me. I appreciate that. I'll get back to you. And let the better angels of yourself come forward, because you will be proud long term
Yes.
when you stayed sort of, it's like a guitar that's tuned just right. You get strummed, you buzz a little, but you don't break. But a guitar that's strung really tight, it all goes to hell. And then you go back and you say, oh my God, that was not the better me. And I could have done better. Yeah. So what you're always doing with spirituality and religion is preparing. It's a rehearsal. I talk about it's a rehearsal. I talk about that again and again in that chapter. You're rehearsing and preparing for moments when you want to remain present and respond, not react.
So good. So good. I just like in red wrote down quiet. You want a quiet mind under control. And I also love that rehearsal idea. Well, let me close the third thing with this. It's again in the book. And I just loved your line, search for a spirituality that serves you. So whatever that is, that's again, my favorite chapter. The book is so practical. There's action plans and things like that everybody will find their own version.
Yeah, and this isn't like go to the store and you can pick whatever can you want. There's so many different yogas. There's so many different meditation techniques. There's so many. And here's the other thing I've said. And again, after I wrote the book, that chapter, I realized that Stoicism is the closest thing you get to a spiritual / religious philosophy. And it's popular as ever. Yeah. Why? Because it's a way of rehearsing and understanding what you can and cannot control. And so it's teaching you to be prepared and understand a world where all you have is control over you, nothing else.
Oh.
And so if you don't like the religion or spirituality, try philosophy, because it's the closest thing to it.
Yes. Yes, and more yes. I'm convinced that it's the people that have the ability to have that quiet mind under control, or said a different way, quickly flip to whatever happens. The right next response is generosity. Every time. If the right next response is deepening the relationship, every time. You win the big deal, lean in and say, I want to learn from this. How can we invest in your success even though we didn't win? Like, I don't care if it's the lowest of lows in relationship development or the highest of highs. These are the times when you want to quickly respond with generosity. Those are the people that over the long haul succeed. So, okay, number 4, we've got 5 vitamins. I need to check too. Are you okay on time? I'm okay.
I am.
Yeah, me too. This is great because I told you in our pre-work, this is going to be a 7-hour interview. So, we're because there's so much good stuff. Okay. 4th thing, I wrote down connect and socialize. That might not have been the actual chapter title, but tell me what you mean, broad strokes, and then we'll dial it in.
Yeah. Well, more than ever, as I write about in the chapter, human beings are living alone, spending more time alone, and going it alone. It's no wonder that we're feeling intensely lonely, and public health systems are having to deal with the epidemic of loneliness. But loneliness and disconnection is part of languishing. It's a piece of it. In those 3 questions that reflect, right? The warm, trusting relationships, the sense of belonging, and the sense that you have anything to contribute to others in your community. So my point in bringing that up is that I don't think The modern world is very helpful in encouraging us to practice the skills that are necessary for not only prioritizing those kinds of three kinds of relationships, but even developing a sense that those are the things that really matter, right? And that's what you really need. It's not any relationship that matters. It's the ones where you can build trust and warmth. And if you have it, why aren't you spending time and prioritizing that kind of relationship?
Mm.
If you don't, you're planted in a community, but you don't belong. Well, why are you tolerating that? If you can move and find a place where you do belong, or if you can change your sense of belonging, why not
Yeah.
change that? And last, if the community or the place you're a part of doesn't value what you have to give, then don't think less of yourself that you have nothing to give. There's a place in the world where what you have to give, there's a need. So I think those three things are really important when we talk about socializing, connecting, because those are the things that make people feel fully alive, where they
Yeah.
belong, where they can contribute, and where there's trust and warmth.
Yes. And as you were talking, one of the things that I've seen as really successful for the best relationship and business developers is they create their own communities to connect and socialize it. So what do I
Mm.
mean? Well, the people who sometimes more struggle more sort of wait for their company to give them groups or coaching or mentors or whatever. The
Mm.
people who are the best are the ones that create them themselves. So, for example, there was a consultant, he was an actuary that I met. I was a former actuary, and he started a group, like just like a book club in his office around relationship development skills.
Hmm.
And he didn't have a leadership role at the time, but he just wanted to learn this. So he thought, hey, why don't I get some other people and we're just going to start learning this in our office? Well, so
Yeah.
successful, it spread to other offices. He was
Mm.
named an office manager at a ridiculously young age in just a couple of years because he became really good at it. So he created his own community. I'll give you three examples. That's one, create a community within an organization.
Yeah.
Another example is outside. So maybe finding strategic partners that could go to work or go to market together, or even putting clients together is a great way to create a community. That's a second
Yeah.
example, which I think is really cool. A third example, which I've benefited from tremendously in the last 4 or 5 years, is I got invited to a mastermind group of other
Mm.
business owners. Boy, has that been remarkable. So the same person who puts that on, we got together and created a bigger group of more of a like a 50-person group. The original mastermind was like 8 people. We created like a 50-person group that got together just solely for the purpose of helping each other. Then that went so well, another person invited me down. So now I'm in 4 different mastermind groups of business owners. But Corey, which is a little much, but I learned so much. I'm a little older than a lot of the people in the group, so I'm able to help a decent amount. But I'm telling you,
Right.
I'm the one who benefits because I learn all these all kinds of new things. And I feel a
Yes.
sense of community in each of those. There's either a
I
WhatsApp
know.
group or a text stream or a Slack channel. Like we're talking all the time. And I just feel so connected. And as I read that chapter, I was like, gosh, I just feel so
Mm.
fortunate that I'm so connected in
Yeah.
all these different ways. Anyway, back to you.
Well, I don't know if you remember, there was a study done by medical doctors, and it was three specialties that are very demanding. One of them, emergency medicine, obstetrics, and gynecology, and I forget the third, but these are among all the medical specialties extremely demanding and very
Yeah.
challenging. And they were studying whether they were mentally healthy or languishing. And what they found was that the level of stress and challenge and adversity had nothing to do with whether they were flourishing or languishing. It was how supportive the environment was.
Ooh,
So, if the environment wasn't supportive in the following sense, they didn't have a calm, pleasant atmosphere with their coworkers, where, in other words, I call that they tend to get along. If they didn't have coworkers that understood that we all have bad days, they didn't have a place where coworkers and management understand not only you have bad days, but they will be there for you and they will support you. And then last, they didn't have a place to work where there was genuine collegiality, meaning they didn't have the experience of warmth, openness, and trust, again, in that work environment. So it's not that people can't do hard. They can do hard without sacrificing their mental health if they have the kind of relationships we're talking about, what
Yeah.
that study called a very supportive work environment. But when you expect people to do really hard and challenging, but you don't have any or much of those things, you will sacrifice your talent. And there's no need to do that, because there are people, like you said, who are really good at creating that and sustaining that. And I suspect once you create those kinds of environments, people protect them and nurture them, because they know when you lose that, it's very hard to rebuild. People know when they have something good, they're going to protect it. So I
Yeah.
love that study because it sends the message to employers. It's not that we don't want demanding, challenging, and sometimes we can't deal with stress. It's just that don't expect that of me all the time when I have no relationships that I would consider collegial and supportive and understanding.
Yeah.
Then you will destroy me.
Yeah. And I put a red circle around that idea of supportive. And I think
Yeah.
the practical takeaway that the listener or the watcher can maybe take is, A, if you're in a really not a culture like that, get out. But B, you can also go a long way about creating your own networks, create your own
What?
groups, yeah, that are around the
Yeah,
most challenging things or just in general. I think people can have some agency around this as well that I think is important. Let's go
I
into
agree.
play. So
Yeah.
5th out of 5,
I
play.
love, I
The line I
know.
the line I wrote down was to break away from the achievement obsession.
Yes.
Yeah, but tell us what play is.
Well, I don't use the definition that play researchers use because it's applied to children.
Mm.
And they tend to have this very restrictive notion of play, which is that it can't come with rules already attached to it or ways of doing it. Right? That's not play for children. Play is when you kind of create the boundaries, the rules, and all the actors and whatnot. And I get that. But that's not right. That's not the way adults play. We don't do imaginary anymore. So, play is anything that you approach with the attitude that the outcome is only making it interesting. I don't need to win
Mm.
to have fun. The outcome doesn't matter. That may just make it interesting. Even if you place a bet on it, that just makes it interesting if you're playing a softball game,
Mhm.
right? Or who has to buy the first round of Coca-Cola or beers, right? Who cares? But the point here is you do it simply because you want to and you want to have fun. And so time is no longer about money, because let's just speak plainly. People don't play when their mindset is, I'm wasting my time because I could be doing something that's more useful, right? Which is usually work related or getting chores done. That kind of mindset that play is a waste of time. Don't play if that's your attitude, because you're not going to benefit.
Mhm.
The man who created the pinball machine, I don't know if you remember in the chapter,
Yeah, I do.
but
I
I
thought this was
just,
super fascinating. I didn't know a
oh
thing
my,
about this. Yeah.
yes, that game was created during the Great Depression. And it was designed specifically to not only have, and it wasn't about distracting people, but giving them something that created a sense of not only fun, but accomplishment. Because that was the point of pinball. He was asked, what makes a game really good? And he said it has three things. It provides people with a sense of accomplishment. It has cause and effects, which means it requires the player to develop some sort of a skill to
Mhm.
accomplish things. And then third, I love this. It makes people feel that what they do matters. Who would have thought a game and that games are orchestrated for kids and adults such that they help us feel that what we do matters? That's what we lose when, as adults, we say, I don't have time to play. I'm grown up. You know, I can't imagine and have fun anymore. Fun is for my 2-week vacation, which, by the way, is usually stressful preparing for it, usually stressful going to it, and usually
Yeah.
stressful coming back.
Yeah.
So that's not fun, is it? So I think people need to play more. And the last thing I'll say is passive leisure has taken over too much of our what we call leisure. And by passive, I mean you don't have to make anything happen. You just have to sort of click on something, sit down, and you say you're doing leisure. Like people watching the Super Bowl. I get it. It's fun, it's a social thing, but it's extremely passive. And research has shown that passive leisure helps people languish. Active leisure, where you
Mm.
have to go out and make it happen. You have to do something to create the leisure, like hike and bike. Just 2 examples because I do, and my wife do a lot of that. Those are the activities that reduce languishing and create flourishing.
Yep.
And so the thing about passive leisure also is it sucks up a lot of time. You don't move very much. And often it's almost as costly as doing the active leisure, but you just don't realize it. So even TV has become leisure in the mindset of many people. And that's the ultra form of passive leisure. And once I was describing this to somebody on a podcast, and she's very keen on reading. She said, is reading books passive leisure? And I said, for most people, it is not, and especially fiction. And I said, please, I have to apologize because we're talking about my book, which is nonfiction. But fiction requires the reader to become one and engage with a world of ideas and imagination. And you're flexing a muscle that you need as an adult to begin and to keep hoping and imagining a better future for yourself. So reading can be very engaging, very active, and it's very good for your imagination because you don't lose the need for your imagination when you're adult. You just apply it to goals and dreaming something better for yourself or other people.
Yeah.
That's the way we continue to use our imagination as adults.
Yeah. Well, there's so much in this chapter, and I'm going to link down below for everybody too. Do you know Mike Rucker? He wrote a book called The Fun Habit that came out pretty recently, and it like aligns so he's a core level researcher too. It aligns so well with this chapter. I'll introduce you if you want. But I'll for everybody, if they want to go deeper on this idea, first buy the book Languishing, because it's going to align with everything else Corey's talking about. If you want to go deeper in that, The Fun Habit is really great. I think my wife and I, as you know, we love hiking too. And Vogel State Park up in North Georgia, which is not just sort of, it's a long drive from where you're at because of the curvy roads. It takes forever to
Mhm.
get there, but not far as the crow flies. And we just went up for 2 days in a cabin. And there's something about the play of going on the hike. I ran a trail run, which is difficult. It was like it's play because you're trying to dodge the rocks and not turn an ankle. And there's something mysterious in
Yeah.
my mind around every corner. I just love it. And even though I've hiked or ran that trail a lot, the Bear Hair Trail, it was just I was just on cloud nine when I finished because I just love that part of the state, the country, and in that. And then I also think,
Yeah.
so I think play not only takes us lets us exercise different parts of the mind, but it also just helps us recharge. Like just
Yeah.
Becky and I talking about life, staring at the fire outdoors, breathing the fresh air. I mean, that felt playful to us. We were disconnected
Yeah.
from the chores of the to-do list of at home. We were away and there was like there's no to-do list because we can't do anything because it's all back here.
Hmm.
So I feel like not only does I guess it's sort of the same, but there's something about the play aspect that can help with the relationship and business development because it's intense. It can be stressful to do all those other things, to be learning
Yeah.
something new, engaging in all these relationships, all the stuff that we talked about with the first four vitamins. But there's something about play that lets us sort of recharge and then come back stronger, I think. Your thoughts?
I yes, and I also talk about I think you can extend play to being playful about
Yeah.
the way you do
Ah,
ordinary things. Like
yeah.
every time I mow my lawn, I approach it in a playful way. I'm creating different. I call it lawn art.
I saw that in the book. It was so
Yeah,
great. Yeah, expand.
I I love this friend who said vacuuming became playful and fun when he realized it was a toy for his one of his pets. I think it was his dog started. And so he would vacuum and get his work done, but at the same time, he was playing with his pets. And the reason I bring up this playfulness is because wouldn't it be fun to do client development by saying, well, hey, call up this person you want to meet. What do you really enjoy that you haven't been doing? And imagine you go to REI and you do some wall climbing and you're talking business as you two are climbing the wall, having fun.
Yeah, yeah,
And because I don't know about you, but I think this is gender neutral. But I remember as a boy when we did things together, rather than always facing each other, we were doing things together and walking and playing. We talked about things that we wouldn't normally talk about. And it's a way of engaging people while they're having fun. We let ourself and our ego go to the background
yeah,
and we become the kind of person who keeps saying yes, kind of in an improvisational attitude. Yes, tell me more. Yes, let me think about that. Rather
yeah,
than, oh, I don't have time for this. I'm too important to be wasting this time.
yeah,
Play play puts your ego behind and takes the person who wants to say, well, let me think about that. I have an idea. Let's talk.
yeah. Even it now you're getting me thinking, like, we love board games, so we played Wingspan, or we
Mhm.
basically made our whole basement be a game extravaganza with shooting pool, ring on a string, and probably, I don't know, 50 or 60 board games, and we just love it, and I really feel like I'm a better business person because I play a decent amount, because you learn how to allocate resources in a board game or Euro style game or whatever. And then back to your
Mhm.
playfulness idea, it made me think, I hadn't thought of this in 15 years, but there was a point early on when we started big where I just thought I was still developing some of our methods for meeting new people, fostering new
Mhm.
relationships is what we call it now. And I always thought, I think there's a way to do this cold marketing, which is what we called it instead of cold calling, which sounds really like a low level telemarketer. But
Mhm.
there's a way to do cold marketing way that could work. And I can remember I'm like, I'm just going to take some time and I'm going to write 3 really nice handwritten notes to CEOs that were in our building and drop off our materials and just offer a meeting. And I was testing different ways of doing it. And I really didn't care what happened. I was more just
Yeah.
like curious about what would happen. Like you said, like be curious about more of the outcome, but I wasn't connected to it at all. And I just dropped them off and I just thought, I can't wait to see what happens. And in the end, it turned out 3 out of 3 people said I want to meet, but that didn't matter as much as I wanted to see, like, would it even work? Can you can you even, get a meeting with somebody you don't know at all? And what do you do to get it?
Yeah.
And it'll be fun. And then one became a big client. But I think what was interesting was just trying maybe that's not play because maybe it's learning something new. But for me, it was sort of like I was excited just to see what would happen. I don't know if that fits your
Yeah.
definition or not.
Well, I think if you're open to the idea that this sounds a little fun to you and it could be fun for the other person, or at least a little different,
Yeah.
right? With a
I
with a smile, can you imagine somebody smiling just a little when they receive what you just talked about? If
Yeah.
that's the spirit in which it's given,
That's
I
what it was.
think, yes, you're exercising a kind of muscle that it is built from playfulness. Let's
Yeah.
try this. Let's have a little
Yeah.
fun at this. Let's do it a little different.
Yeah. Yeah, like I remember putting a PS on one of them, trying different things. I said, I'll bet this will be the closest or the shortest commute you've ever had for a meeting because we were literally like 2 floors apart.
Mhm.
But I was trying to like inject some levity in it.
Yeah.
And he
Exactly.
commented on that. He thought it was funny. Woo! Well, this is great. And I just think, obviously the title of the book is Languishing. For me, what I took away is about flourishing. And I couldn't believe how many just alignments and commonality, with our philosophies there were. I was just excited about that. And I just couldn't wait to be on the show. Corey, how can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more? I mean, obviously the high recommend for me is, I didn't actually count these, but it's like a 92 tab book. So obviously buying the book Languishing is a no-brainer, but how else can people get in touch with you or just say thank you or whatever?
Well, my publisher has created a little website. I don't have my own website. That's never been my shtick. Although, if I decide to sort of move forward with trying to get more of the 5 vitamins into people's lives, I may reconsider that. But for
Yep.
now, the book is a great place to start. If you want to contact me, I retired early from Emory. So if you try to reach me from my Emory email, it'll bounce back and give you my Gmail email
there you go.
address. And people have been finding that and contacting me. That's probably the best way. But of course, there's the website from the publisher. It's called Languishing Book, all one word, all in lowercase, languishingbook.com.
I love it. Those are great. Those are great endings. Let me, if you don't mind, Corey, I don't know if you've ever been on an interview and somebody read your book to you as an ending, but I'd like to do that.
Sure.
Does that sound
Yes.
good?
No, yes, it does.
I thought this is like a paragraph and a longer one and a shorter one. And I just thought it pulled the whole book together for me. So this is a great little inspirational ending. And this is you're writing this. This is in the book Languishing. There's a beautiful quote that's attributed to Pope Francis in which he reminds us that nothing in nature lives for itself. Rivers do not drink their own water. They give it to us so we may survive and live well. Trees do not bask in their own shade or, if food-bearing, do not eat their own fruits or nuts. But we are giving sustenance by eating their food. He ends by saying that it is natural that we want to be happy and it is fine to be happy. But it's better, he concludes, that someone else is happy because of you. We are part of nature. We cannot flourish if we exist only for ourselves. It is good for you to flourish. It is better when others flourish because of you. That is why it's good to have a purpose in life, but it is even better to live your purpose. Corey.
Sorry, you brought that particular passage. You're looking at what I call the wall of love that I described in my book. Those are people who did that very thing for me. And they were my earth angels. And I think it's a great way to live. All of us have the potential to be on this earth angels for others. And that's a great way to get flourishing because you give it and help others. That's a beautiful ending.
It's the perfect ending. I think we're done.
Yeah.
Corey, thanks for being on the show. This is just, the book was, I had high expectations. It was better than I expected. You're an amazing human, and thanks for doing what you're doing.
Thank you, Mo. And I really appreciate the opportunity, and the work you do is very special for the work business community. So keep at it.
We'll do. Let's both flourish.
All right.